The industry panel discussion was initiated by Oliver Schwabe. We have seen his paper just before that last paper. And he is occupied very much with estimating the cost and uncertainty of innovation implementation in industry. He has found a really valuable set of persons to form a panel for discussion. Namely, that's Tanja Missfeld, Fiona Sammler, René Wenzel, Campbell, and Nolan. In the background, they have prepared a study, and the study from which Oliver Schwabe will report shortly. Technically, in the background, they have prepared a kind of web meeting, and we will going to switch into that web meeting. We're going to show that web meeting to you. Please, if you have questions, if you have comments, please post that in the comments here in this live stream below in the commenting section. We will forward that to the live conferencing, and they will also see the questions and comments, and they will be answered by the discussion panel and picked up by the discussion panel, Oliver Schwabe and his colleagues. Now we will need a moment to get that one connected. We will leave you for a moment here. You won't hear us for a moment so that we can do that in the background. And then we will switch directly into that conference room and then start that session. After the session, which will take approximately 1 hour, we will see how far the discussion takes us. And then, so we will see that, and it may take a little bit longer than 1 o'clock. So we would really be happy if you would stay with us for the time. We know in Europe, Central Europe, it's lunchtime, but we did place that at that time of the day in favor for also the people from America and also for the people from Asia, for them to have convenient times in all their time zones there. Okay, so I can hear from the camera control room that we will wait a bit for also for the live stream number 2 to finish. So they're going to have the question and answer right there, and then we will be with you in another minute. Let me just briefly also announce the 8th CIRPe Global Web Conference. This one is going to take place in 2020, broadcasted by KU Leuven. Have a look at the opening session video recording that we have made for you. It's ready and available at that very same YouTube channel here. There you can see the announcement of Karel Kellens, who was announcing the conference for next year. So we would really love to see your contributions there as well. We would really love to see that you support the conference next year as you did this year. And that's really, that was really good fun doing that right now. Okay, so we're going to leave you for a minute now in order to get the technical stuff sorted out, and then we're going to join that. After the industry panel discussion, there will be the closing session, some closing remarks. I will meet Pina Bilge, who did the other moderation, and we will do some closing remarks on the conference. Thank you for your patience and for staying with us.
Hey, we are online. This is what Ernst is telling me. Ernst, studio. We have a video from the studio. Berlin, can you come in?
Hi.
Hi.
This is Francis calling from here. So thanks for being with us. All of you, we have seen that you're all available and ready. Now I'm going to hand over the moderation to Oliver. I will say nothing for an hour now. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. And then we will take over after you finish to do then the closing session afterwards.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I have Skype open separately in case there are any problems. All right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a couple of videos. Everyone, welcome. I see we have 17 participants and growing. Let's put a 0 behind that. Right? Let's put in all the bots. So you see some videos. We'll go back to René, Tanja, and Fiona in a moment. And let me just start off with a few words about what we're trying to do, what we've done. We have time, and above all, we would like to have a discussion today, right? And we'd like to share some of our experiences. So could I just have a quick Skype note from the studio that you can see my slide in PowerPoint mode and that you can hear me properly? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, Ernst. We've got multiple technologies available. All right then. So this is, welcome to the CIRPe2019 event. I've been participating for about 5 years now in this event. I think it's the best thing since sliced bread for researchers. Many good things about it. Above all, I don't have to travel. I like traveling, but conferences can be tiring. This is the first year where we are trying to connect participants a bit more tightly with industry, because we from industry extremely interested in new ideas, but we have major challenges in digesting all of the good ones. So about 50 new good ideas in this conference, hundreds of conferences. And when we start thinking about this panel discussion, which is common in face-to-face conferences, my suggestion was to talk about cost estimation. What is it going to cost to implement an idea presented in a conference? So all of you who've written papers, if we, Rolls-Royce, or a company like BAE Systems, Airbus, Mercedes, were to implement it, how would we go about it? And this is a rigorous field of professionals. And we started off discussing what is cost, and then actually realized we're talking about implementation. Right? This is implementing ideas out of the production engineering space. And it's very much an investigation I'd like you to take part in, and a discussion I'd like you to take part in. And so we went ahead and we evaluated 50 papers. I'll get to that a little bit, based upon an established framework, and would like to feedback a little bit about where we see the maturity of the papers in respect to an industry implementation, provide some stories and thoughts about how the authors can present their ideas better so we can digest them or even listen to them. And just a quick note to the studio, you have the pack. Please feel free to put it online and distribute it as you like to all the participants. Absolutely fine. And before I launch in and just ask for some the colleagues to present themselves, one quick comment. In this slide pack, I have a picture at the front called Flatland. If you haven't read it, Flatland was published in 1884 and is the story of, it's a romance in two dimensions, length and breadth. And it's a classic, a beautiful little romance story. And it talks about shifting perspective. And when we talk about implementing ideas, we really need to shift the way we think, both the researcher and industry and everyone involved. And A. Square, the narrator of the story Flatland, has this core phrase, move upwards, so into the third dimension, not northward, which is sideways or forwards and backwards. Definite recommendations, quick read, it's a good read. In order to implement what we see in the conference, we need to think differently. So the aim was sharing and explaining results of a readiness assessment, give you a feeling for what good looks like. Now, all results here are anonymous. Please reach out to me individually if you'd like to have individual results and some guidance. And we're trying to understand implementation. This is not cut and dried. It's not a science. It's a very human thing as well. Why join? Well, you can compare yourself a little bit. I know you don't have your individual scores yet, but you will be able to compare yourself a little bit and reflect today in the session as well. Takeaways: how to increase implementation readiness, understand how to capture industry attention a little bit more easily. So, in that respect, welcome to the panel. Maybe I can just walk through and ask you to say a few words about yourself. Andy, starting with you, Andy Nolan from Rolls-Royce.
The Chief of Estimation. So my job is to develop capability, methods, training guidance for how the company should develop its cost and schedule estimates.
Thank you, Andy. And cost, we are coming here with our framework from the cost readiness assessment work or framework work that Andy's done. based on many industry standards. So thank you, Andy. And if I miss an attribution, it'll go towards Andy. Everyone, he's a great guy. So next up, René, a few words.
Hi, my name is René Wenzel. I'm working as a head of project management in a site close to Frankfurt, Oberursel. I'm responsible for all the project portfolios we have to deliver as a site throughout cost development or improvement, introduction of new products, changing of supply chain, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you, René. Chris, do we have you online? Chris couldn't make it. Okay, Fiona, welcome.
Yes, hello. Fiona Sammler is my name. I am a professor of manufacturing here in Berlin, so I teach manufacturing and material science, and on the side, let's say, or besides that, I am involved with a company based in Ireland, where we analyze or help mostly SMEs to improve their R&D processes, so to use the tools that are available to them, which are often quite limited on the SME space, in order to either start their journey on the R&D road or to improve what they are currently doing. And we're trying also to put some factors on that to kind of put a readiness scale or some kind of metrics on that R&D journey. So that's what I'm involved in.
Yeah, thank you. And Tanja, I think last.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Tanja Missfeld. I'm a partner in EY. I work in the area of R&D and innovation services, where we support our clients in the development and introduction of new technologies and other type of innovations. I also have a focus on establishing innovation ecosystems, and I spent the last year co-creating one of these innovation ecosystems in the area of advanced manufacturing. Very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tanja, for taking time. Obviously, did I miss anyone? Did anyone join? Okay, it's fine. So before I proceed, you may ask yourself, what is the picture on the bottom right? An ox. And if you'd like to know more about what this picture means, please Google Sir Francis Galton and the ox. And essentially, it's all around the story that projects, estimation, implementation, it's a social phenomena, it's crowds implementing things, it's people. Technology plays a role, but it's not everything. In some cases, it's also just a small part of it. This is something we will see as well. So what did we do? As I mentioned, interested in the implementation readiness with an experimental approach. We're using cost estimation readiness levels, which is a whole framework of science and methods and industry processes. Looked at the 50 conference contributions, and we were actually surprised. So on the right, you sort of see the levels. Andy cut and paste from one of your packs. Thank you. This is around estimate readiness level, so ERL 9, for example, at the top. That is a point where we manage a project at plus minus 5% accuracy, at least in cost, but also in planning accuracy, let's say so. ERL 8, minus 9, plus 10%. We're going down in more and more less mature. ERL 5 is the minimum we work with in industry. If it's below a readiness level 5, so it has a certain uncertainty related to cost, to requirements, to schedule, we're not going to touch it. So going into this event, my expectation was conference contributions, early research. This is going to be way at the bottom, very inaccurate, very early. In fact, the average ended up at around a 6. Now, a 6 is enough to inform, to have a serious conversation. Wow, we were surprised. So it's saying a lot of conference contributions, relatively mature for an industry discussion. Highest one was about 6.55, lowest one just below 5. It was pretty good. So we were surprised. I'll go into the questions in a moment. We considered every paper to be a proposal. This is just the angle we came from, up for discussion next year, I guess. papers address a research gap. It's usually they're proposing something against to close that gap. Are we as an industry, is it ready for us? How mature is it? Can we have a discussion on it? So as I mentioned, they're based upon the concept of cost readiness levels. They actually go back into the 1950s, we have to say nowadays. Followed up in the 90s, it was refined. NASA really strong in this in the 2000s, basically because they were always off the mark. They've implemented a lot of ideas, which cost a lot more money than they planned to. This is where it comes from. And the constructive cost model out of the software world basically developing a little bit out of that. We adapted the survey questions a little bit, reviewed the papers. To be quite honest, it was a high-level review. It's exploratory, but it did pass standard. Okay. So in the slide pack, what you're going to get is a description of the levels, right? This is the sort of turnaround picture of the past. So if you assess, let's say from an industry perspective, using this framework, we assess a paper, how implementation ready could it be, or ready for discussion. A level 1, do not use. We can't use it. We're not even going to take the time to discuss with you. Level 2, we might explore a little bit. 3 is a strategic one. 4, we begin looking at options. At 5, we're likely to react and say, give me some information. This looks mature enough. The more mature and robust, so more towards the bottom, the easier it is for us to implement. A lot of detail in the slide, but just take the narrative with you. The more robust, the less work we have, the less we need to invest into something. So the questions, we picked them up out of the year of this estimate readiness level structure, adjusted them a little bit. 5 questions with questions. So across the top, the intent of the proposal, so the paper was clear. Did the author clearly describe the challenge, its purpose, and benefits, and beneficiaries? On the right, and you can review this in detail then moving forward on the discussion. The highest criteria we sort of set, and there's some sub-criteria as well, is, for example, in respect to did the paper address a specific challenge? Was it clearly described? So the best thing was the challenge was described using industry standards. Now, this is the language we need to think about. The more aligned to a standard something is, at least in language, the easier it is for us to begin discussions with colleagues. You can go down the list, were beneficiaries identified. The author of the proposal was competent. This is something we usually think about when an idea is brought to us. Now, this was a bit special because obviously the papers were not written against a framework like this. But did the paper meet formal requirements? If you can't write a formal paper, we begin to have doubts, so to speak. But obviously all of them met that because they wouldn't have been published otherwise. Were publications made in the domain journals? Did we see some evidence? Now, obviously there are going to be gaps in all of these because the papers weren't written against a framework. Had they been written, they would have been more robust and might enter into conversation more easily. Of note is, get to that now, is if I take the average scores across the questions, and if I just say, I'll take a level 8 as a cutoff. So where did the papers, where were they really good? Well, they were all formally well written. Thank you to France and the team and the whole CIRPe organization. Great papers, very mature, very robust, very solid. Same thing for revision comments. Right? Were they addressed in the papers or not? Now, I must admit that we did not have access to all of these in that respect, so this was a bit of a guesstimate, but in the end, the paper was published and the conference must have been addressed. And the data was current, all papers with very current data. This is important for us. Data 10 years ago doesn't help. We need current data. Where were the papers sort of off the mark from an implementation perspective? From the top, benefits. What's the benefit for industry? What were the beneficiaries? Missed that discussion. Why do this? Understanding whether the authors had practical knowledge what they were talking about. There was very little evidence. Obviously, it's difficult to find that. Papers not focused at that, but this is important for us. proposals supported by key stakeholders, so the key stakeholders were involved in the paper. Little evidence, but it's things we are looking for, and what support was needed to implement. Right? So if the papers focus more on that, they become more robust, more mature, more ready for an implementation discussion. Almost through. So this is the evaluation. 50 papers. This is just the number of papers across the bottom. This is not the paper IDs, please. And on the left, on the vertical axis, these sort of 9 stages from at the bottom, do not use to explore expectations and moving upwards. I put a red line in as a cutoff at 4. As industry, I'll just say black and white. Below 4, not interested. I don't have the time for this. We can discuss in a moment. And above, if it's above a 7, get really interested. Okay.
Hi, Oliver. Andy here.
Yes.
Are you accepting questions or?
In a moment. Okay. So, okay. Is the slides coming up properly? I'm just seeing a couple of questions. So on Skype, are you seeing this properly?
We see the slide properly. The one with the graph still.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Just wanted to double check. And I just see there's a question on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. I'll get back to that in a moment. Okay. So overall, so going back. So actually, quite mature papers. There were no outliers, which says a lot about the maturity of this conference. And we'll get into that in a second. As I said, anyone participating, individual assessments, you are one of those dots. I'm happy to discuss. Overall, conference papers had a really good scientific quality. They weren't obviously designed for an industry implementation, more focused on what are we doing and why and how. Right? This is the big paradigm shift. This is the move upward, not northward. Research papers, I mean, I've been in space, I am in the space. This is a lot about what we want to do, but why do it? How can we do it? Right? And if you move from research papers to writing research proposals or projects, this is the emphasis we need to work together to move to. From an industry perspective, very little actually jumped out at me as interesting. Now that maps into a question we just had in YouTube. I'll get to that in a second. But it was a lot better than we thought, from an industry perspective. So, moving us into the discussion, I can move around between the slides. I phrased some questions for the panel members, and there were some for the discussion participants, just to sort of trigger this thinking. But I'll just answer one question on the YouTube. Don't you have to be an expert in all the research fields to assess a paper? I'll put this out to the panel in a second. My personal thought is we have 50 papers in many, many different research fields. How important is the what is being proposed to the how and the why? So let me just start off with Andy, perhaps. So question for you, Andy. Come off mute. Remember that. Do you have to be an expert in the field a proposal is in to understand its maturity, its robustness, its readiness? What do you think?
Okay. The question I was going to ask you is maturity to me, or success of a paper, is the degree of how much I have to think. I have to concentrate and assess down of paper. So if papers are written for X, by X, I don't think.
You're breaking up a little bit, Andy.
All right. What I was thinking that if it takes an expert to evaluate an expert's paper, we're going to lose something. For me, when I used to look after a research group at university, the more I had to think, or Rolls-Royce had to think about the paper they received, the less successful that paper was. the paper had to do the thinking for the people. It had to be in a simple language and a simple, it was very obvious what the value was. So does it need an expert to evaluate? Possibly, but I think if an average person can evaluate the value of it, then that's good. That's better.
Yeah. So again, we spend a lot of time trying to share ideas inside an organization, cascades into other spaces. And we try to actually, many stakeholders have no clue about the technology, but they own the budget, so they are senior managers with many thoughts, where you need to simplify a lot. So yes, but could be. René, just a thought. What do you think about this? Do you need to be an expert to understand the potential of an idea, the implementation readiness? What do you think? Come off of your mute. René, you still with us? Hi.
Hang on, I have a mute button.
Okay.
Good. No. Yeah. I'm with Andy on that. When something comes or is developed outside a company, I think the major challenge for them is to attract the stakeholders, and you don't attract stakeholders when your paper is too complex, too hard to understand. People need to maybe do a bit of research themselves before they really understand what you want from them. So your language has to be very easy. It has to come to the point. You have to also get an understanding of the multiple people that work in an enterprise with different understandings, knowledges, etc., etc. We have these issues in terms of project management. Everybody asked us, as a project manager, can you really do the project without having the detailed understanding of what we're trying to implement? And I say, no, I just need a rough understanding. It is good if you are experienced, because it helps you structure your project. It helps you maybe in identifying the right stakeholders. It may give you a hint of what kind of risks are out there, but you don't have to be an expert to deliver the project. So it is similar to these papers. These papers have to be simple for us to understand and to be attractive. And hence my question is also, or my answer would be, no, you don't. It is more to the expert. Yeah, it's more to the expert to convince me, because if he can't, all his research is not saleable. So these days, researchers have also to be salesmen, otherwise they don't get the money. I mean, they get fundings from governments, they might get fundings from enterprises, they might get crowdfunding, whatever. So if you can't convince these stakeholders to invest in your idea, you are lost.
And I would perhaps just emphasize the stakeholder thing a little bit, because any idea is implemented by a crowd of people, a large crowd sometimes, and not all of them are experts. Many play different roles across the life cycle of a project. What is the way in? There are many ways into starting a discussion. Tanja, what do you think?
Yes, I also agree with all of you. So actually in my work, I, as a generalist, from my background, I'm an economist. I work together with the researchers and the engineers, and I help them to put down their ideas and proposals in easier language, in order for them to have the chance to get the right partners they need to establish their ecosystem, and then to also access funding. And I think that's exactly the kind of way forward, that you are an expert in the specific field, and you need other people to give you maybe more sense of what is the industry perspective, what is the business side of your idea going to look like, so that you can translate it into something that is easy to read, to grasp, and gets the attention of people.
I'm just seeing, Yamila, you've got a brilliant comment. I'll get back to you in a second. Fiona, what do you think? Sorry for being last up. You'll be first up on the next question.
No problem. Yes, I would agree. I think also that from my own experience on the academic side as well, that a lot of the time when writing proposals or papers and then speaking with industry about them, that they're too, I wrote down as a note, academic-y. Now that's not a word, of course, but that, you know, that we tend to, as researchers, sometimes get lost in our own research and kind of find it difficult, I suppose, to portray that to people who are not maybe quite as deeply involved or don't have the time as you do when you're still working in research to consider just that, whereas in industry there's always less time to kind of think. So sometimes I would think it's actually quite good not to be an expert, because once you take a step back and look at something when you're not quite as deeply involved, then you see different aspects to that, and you kind of start to ask different questions, as Tanja just said, that, you know, you look at something from a different perspective, which can be quite beneficial, I think, to a lot of research proposals. So I think it's quite good always to have some fundamental knowledge to be able to understand, of course, what the research proposal is about, but it's really important for those people writing it that they're very clear, that they're not too academic-y. And I wrote down as a note also really clear graphics, I think, are really, really important. So when I look at a paper, I very quickly often look at the graphs first, and the literature review, actually. Those 2 points I look at, because they give me a very quick insight into how competent the researcher is and how robust the proposal is. So the graph with the results, you can gather a lot of information from very quickly, and the literature review gives you very good insight into how deep this person or these people have really delved into their own research area.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is also a lot about, I always try to emphasize, we're trying to create what we call a coalition of the willing, a team, a group of people who together share a certain enthusiasm, a certain interest, who have a benefit. That benefit can be many different things. We're going to take something and implement it. You know, manufacturing space for certain companies, extremely complicated worlds, slow-moving worlds, often for many good reasons. Rolls-Royce, highly regulated, product safety, incredibly important, and so on and so forth. And so Yamila posted a really great question, which is, so the secret to succeed from an industry perspective is to have a great sales pitch. Tell you why you want what I propose and how I'll make it happen. Is that correct? A big smile, Yamila, because sort of at the beginning of the conference I mentioned that sometimes ideas or the success of ideas depends upon how well they are sold, how confident we are, how good the team is, time of day, lots of factors coming in. Just to set the context before I go back to Fiona to have her share her thought, is in one of our manufacturing facilities at Rolls-Royce a couple of years ago, I was talking to the continuous improvement team. They were continuous improvement ideas to make things better. They said, well, they get approximately 6,000 to 7,000 improvement ideas internally in the company, in the site, annually. And they are lucky if they can tackle 4 to 5% of those.
Joining the conference.
So for an idea coming in from the outside, you're not alone. You're joining a huge crowd of ideas, which are probably all pretty good, vying for attention. So Yamila, my personal opinion is, well, you have to be better than the rest. Funds are limited, attention is limited, people are limited. So Fiona, last up, the last time, first up, what are your thoughts?
I suppose a sales pitch can sound, from a researcher's point of view, sometimes a little bit negative, as if you're not, you're kind of toning down the depth of the research, but I think that's not what's meant here at all. So, there is obviously the recognition that the researchers that are coming to the street to propose ideas are very much delving deep into their own research fields. But yes, to put a sales pitch on that is sometimes quite challenging and is really, really important. And so it's worthwhile to spend some time being really, really clear. And it's good for a researcher, I think, to ask themselves that question too. What is this idea or this research that I'm working on going to change, or is it? Or is it a question that can also be highly interesting, but it might not be something that's going to be implemented in industry, which doesn't make the research any less worthwhile. That's a different discussion. But to be really clear in oneself, what am I hoping to achieve by contacting these people? And I think the other thing is a great sales pitch to people that you don't know is different to a sales pitch to people that you already know and that already respect you and know of your potential and of your work. So I think that comes back to a different point, which is networking in the field, because you will always be listened to, I think, with more open ears by people that you've previously undertaken projects with or that are recommended, et cetera, et cetera. So I would think that's an important point also.
Thank you. So, René, what do you think? How many new suggestions do you deal with in a year? How many can you tackle? Do we have the resources even to pay attention?
Yeah. So to first, to not get mistaken, it is these new ideas, it's these disruptive ideas which get us thinking as well in our day-to-day business, because we are so dragged down in delivering ideas which have been made a couple of years ago, maybe decades ago, to our customers. That's a big portion of my role. New ideas often end up in projects because they have a certain potential. They deliver a business case to the business. They help us make money, so to speak. So all I'm doing is implementing ideas every day, and by getting ideas from the outside. And I often ask for people coming from the outside, look at what I'm doing, look at my business, and say, right, help me to develop ideas, to shift the paradigm, to move forward, to not stand still. And what I often find in these people is the first big hurdle they have to overcome is they have to understand how a big business like Rolls-Royce or all the other big global players are organized. What kind of work is going on? Where are they? Who do they approach with their idea? When they do their research, they often come up with an idea which is very high up already, and they forget about the maturity level they find in the company and the steps it might take the company to realize their idea. It is often not in one go, it is often in many, many steps. And it is this point where I get attracted to an idea, or where I said, yeah, it's a good idea, but as you said, I can't really put my thoughts into it because this idea is so far away, it won't work in this environment for the next couple of years because we are not there yet. People always think when they are outside a certain enterprise, they will find an ideal world within that enterprise, but that's not the case. What you get taught in a university environment is more or less an ideal world, a laboratory environment kind of. And you might find this in some of certain enterprises or in certain business areas. But when I talk for the site here in Oberursel, lots of ideas have to be pushed back because they are too hard to implement. We focus on ideas which give us very quickly a benefit, and we consider that very well, and we see the frustration that comes up with it in our own people, in our own stuff, because we try to ask people for their ideas, and a lot of feedback often comes as, yeah, but when I put an idea forward, it takes years until we implement it. And often the point is, maybe your idea was too high up the mountain and we are not ready for it, or it is too hard to implement. It takes more time, takes more resource, it takes more consideration. So it is an evolvement, and when your idea fits into that evolvement stage quite well, then you are in the right spot. If your idea is more a revolution, then you have to go a very long way, very many extra miles, convince a lot of stakeholders until you are successful.
Yeah. Thank you, René. I mean, we're up to 33 members in the stream a moment ago, and you can post things into the chat. What we get, the perspective is here very implementation focused, which doesn't do justice to many of the papers who are at an earlier stage, especially in a conference. From a researcher perspective, you go to a conference with early stage ideas usually. However, before I move on to Andy, there was a great comment here. I don't know who, it's just a username Grimpenschmidt, but so brilliant ideas fail due to a bad presentation, ? From my point of view, you can see a good manager who gives a nerd a chance, even if the presentation is so-so. I'll hand this over to Andy in a second. I just want to add one thing. Well, giving it a chance means paying attention to it, right? And you are vying for attention. In our internal trainings, Andy, you can share a moment on this, it boils down to the sales pitch, the dynamics a lot of times. Yes, the best ideas can fail because, well, they were just presented incredibly badly. Andy, you experience this regularly, I believe.
It's a statistical thing. I think if you have a good presentation, you have a better chance of success. You just swing the odds in your favor. Do you want me to have a round?
Can I also add
Sorry.
Can I add something? Is that okay? Yes? Okay. So I would actually completely agree with that statement, even though it might look a little bit sad. But I have seen not so good ideas succeed or be chosen because of a great pitch.
Correct.
And but I have not seen so many good ideas with a bad pitch be chosen. And I think one of the major proofs here in this regard is that more and more of the really good universities that have an impressive outcome in terms of spin-offs and other type of innovations in the market, they work regularly with pitch coaches to support their PhD students, to support their innovators they have internally. Especially MIT, for example, I know they work very regularly with pitch coaches to help the researchers kind of put forward the essence of their idea and make it, more relatable for people. That's probably one of the things that's important.
I've got a few rambles just to provoke conversation. Oliver, you mentioned thousands of ideas going forward. When I've looked at those ideas, you find that most of them are bottom-up ideas. They're tiny refinements to existing processes. Now, the problem with researchers is in order for them to make the same proposals, they need to be extremely close to the organization. So success rate may be slightly higher, but their level of integration has to be higher correspondingly. But the bigger ideas, the ones which are more successful, that bring most value, are more revolutionary ideas. But as already mentioned, the success rate will go down. Now, my next-door neighbor was the electronics director for Dyson, and he said for only 5% of ideas make it to the marketplace. So 95% of ideas will fail. They'll give it a try, but then give up. So I think in any research, we have to accept quite a high failure rate anyway. Now, when I used to run a research group at York University, those few ideas that did make it through were, as Oliver's been talking about, had a high maturity. We did have an internal customer, but it still took 8 years to take a research concept through into implementation. Now, one thing that seemed to improve, I know that we talked about stakeholders and things like that, which are all good things. One thing I found is that if you pay for it, you tend to be more interested. If it's free, we tend not to be so interested. So, funded research, I think, has a higher success rate than unfunded.
Yeah. Which is, you actually made an interesting point, which is that there's a differences between creating the idea, selling the idea, beginning to implement it, being successful. One of my areas of interest is diffusion of innovation, how many ideas make it from being an idea into saturating a market. You mentioned Dyson, obviously it's become a household name. And a lot of the pitch coaching and all of these sort of things happening in the research space, this is just the very first step. And yesterday I was looking at the EU Innovation Radar. Google it. Great thing. Innovation Radar EU, which lists all of the great innovations. Annually they assess them, and manufacturing as well. If you tracked how many of those survived to become viable market products, either on their own or in combination or through re-engineering, that percentage gets very, very low. Mm-hmm. And this is also one of the, I think one of the things we're trying to do is to, if there are really, people, let's just assume all 50 papers are really, really good ideas. The effort to market, to sell, to get to implementation is huge. I remember doing a startup years ago with investors as well, and the investors basically told us the effort you put into your product, which is the how to do things, is only about maybe 5 to 10% of the total effort you need, and the rest is marketing, networking, selling, convincing people. You generate that trust. That René will look at it, that Andy will look at it. Let me just think, Fiona, what do you think about that? Is the how just a small fraction of success?
Absolutely, I would agree, Oliver. I haven't heard the metrics before, so the 5 to 10%, that's new to me. It's probably always different in different sectors and things like that. But certainly, in my experience, a very, very large proportion goes back to more than just the how. So marketing, you mentioned, yes, hugely important, and the people, so networking, you said as well. And I think one of the quickest judgments that we all make when we're looking at a proposal or when something is being explained to us, an idea, is to somehow judge the competence of the people that we're dealing with. And I think we all make a judgment on that on a lot of different factors, and not just on the written proposal that's in front of us. So, we look at who are the people, who are they working with, are we aware of those people in that research field? Have we heard about their work previously, et cetera, et cetera. So reputation is hugely important for us to get that interest level up. So I do think that it can't really be overstated how important networking is in order to get research ideas implemented, or at least looked at. Let's say implementing is the next step, but to get the interest levels of future partners up. Yep. and looking at your ideas, I think it's massively important.
Yeah. So as we near the top of the hour, perhaps one of the things, one point I would like to add as well.
Ollie? One point I would like to add to the latest comment is your idea is never in a sole environment. Your idea always competes with other ideas in that environment. So you have to stand out with your idea to attract more people, and to make that happen, the networking point is so important. If you take people along the way with the development of your research, with the development of the ideas that might come out of this, the bigger your group of people is already, which supports your idea when you bring it out. If you wait and prepare your idea in isolation and then think, now I come up with a brilliant idea that will change the world, that will bring so much joy and fun to everybody, then I think you will be the most disappointed person, because people will look at you like a stranger because they haven't heard about it before. So the networking point is really, really important, because you are in competition with other good thinkers, good researchers, people who have even better ideas than you.
Thank you, René.
Can I add something as well? It's Andy here. No doesn't always mean a denial. It often means it's a delay. So when you get no, I see people just give up and walk away. Getting a no to a yes can take years.
Yeah. So, and in that respect, maybe what I'd like to ask all the panel members now to do is just think a second about a single piece of advice you would give to someone who's written a paper, submitted it, and it's the most brilliant thing since sliced bread for them. My piece of advice would be implementation is a team sport. And you have to behave as a team member, and you probably have to create that team yourself. Think about it that way. It's a real team sport with all the behaviors associated with it, and try to write and try to discuss in that way. That's my personal little thing. Andy, a single sentence.
On top of yours then, I agree with yours, and my addition is be patient.
Okay, be patient. René, what do you think?
Yeah, be patient and keep hard working. Coming back to the point regarding the network. Don't work in isolation. Work as a team and collaborate. Find yourself a group of supporters and get a diverse thinking of your idea. The most diverse your idea has been thought through, and people understand that you can test your idea and develop it, and then bring it out piece by piece. Do it in sprints. Don't wait too long, and maybe bring one version out now and then an updated version out a bit later, if that is possible. So you give it to the market in pieces.
Yeah, design thinking sort of comes to my mind. Beta versions, all these sort of things. Okay. And which reminds me, part of the team is the user, right? We have to involve them as well. Tanja? Sure.
I actually had the same recommendation as René. I think the most essential thing is to find good partners that you can continue to develop your idea, and then that will also help you gain credibility, that you have thought about all kinds of issues that there are, because our world is now so complex with the fast technological progress. And I think no organization, but also definitely not a single person, can oversee all of that. And build trust relationships with the people, as you said also, Oliver.
Yeah. And just to comment there, powerful relationship, powerful partners, it doesn't mean that they belong to an organization with a high brand name. This is about individuals. This is like, I'll trust any of you on the panel with working with you. Doesn't mean you have to be in a big company, right? Or any of the researchers. It can be the individual person. Fiona, your sort of spark of wisdom.
Yes, I agree with all of the above, of course, and it's difficult to add something, but I would add also that it's always quite important, I think, to keep up to date with data, and I don't mean data in relation to the actual research on a technical level, but to consistently also be reading and teaching or educating yourself about, for example, economic data on why the idea is good, or on environmental data. So in order to sell the idea, to go back to the sales pitch, it's really, really important to make clear why this idea is a good idea, and that can only be done if the person selling it is also up to date on that. So I was just thinking back to an example I had recently where somebody was kind of pitching an idea, and the data was from 2012, and the economic data that was used and why it's a good idea, and I immediately noticed that, and it kind of went down a notch in my estimation because it's not up to date. So I would think it's a really good idea to keep oneself in on the literature that's not necessarily technical, but in the adjoining fields on why this idea is a good idea.
One thing that also jumps to my mind is that when you are in the research process and are so deeply immersed, I think someone mentioned that, you just get so deep into it, you're so convinced, you're such an expert. Often people don't listen to you anyway, so when you get the chance to talk to anyone, you just want to explain how brilliant you are. And you are brilliant. We all are brilliant. But we forget that the person listening actually has a personal need. They didn't come to listen to you or to validate how great we are, but they came because they have a challenge. Any final comments from the panel? I've really enjoyed this. It's been much too little time. I'm sure we could continue this forever.
Yeah. Maybe if I can add something to the comment I see here from the Grimpenschmidt person. Yeah. So from my point of view, you can see a good manager who gives a nerd a chance even if the presentation is so. Please always consider every organization, no matter how big or how small, is led by people. And people are organized in certain structures, hierarchies, etc., power levels, especially big companies. So even if you approach a good manager, I put good in brackets because I don't know your definition of good for a manager is difficult because if you approach managers, the highest person with the highest power level is often the CEO or and you don't get access to that. So put a bit realism behind it. If you approach certain people with your idea, and it is very dependent on whether your idea hits the power level of that person. If your idea overcomes that power level, this person has another challenge to convince the next level up of your idea. And this is also time consuming. Maybe your idea falls on very good ground, but until it is on the power level and you get the decision you require, because it involves a lot of money, it can take time. Yeah.
Can I add something, Oliver?
Yeah.
The one thing when I had the research group, the ideas have to come in at the clock speed of the organization. If the organization is moving quickly and leaders are turning over and products are turning over, we can't afford to wait a long time for an idea. So if we have a problem today and we need it solved by the end of the week, it doesn't help to go away and do 3 years of research. So increase the clock speed. Well, if you're close to your customer, you'll understand their clock speed.
Okay. Yeah. Tanja, Fiona, any thoughts? Final ones, parting thoughts?
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good metaphor as well. It depends on your idea and where you want to go. Sometimes it's easily because it hits the nail, and we are looking to solve an issue or a problem with exactly your idea. Then your idea is realized as quick as possible. Sometimes the organization is not up for it. Then don't be frustrated.
Yeah, maybe one consoling last comment from my side. So I think one of the issues that is also really important is that you can feel the enthusiasm that the researcher or you as a nerd, so to say, have for your research and for your idea. And I get usually very interested if I feel that a person has a sincere commitment to what they are doing and is very enthusiastic about it. So it's also very important.
Yeah. And I'll just add as a final one, I think we can keep going and going. To be honest, I want to have fun. So I'd like to work with people which give me energy. Just think about the many meetings we go to where you walk out, you're just drained. I'd like to come out of meetings with energy. So many things. I hope we've been up to 43 participants or listeners. I hope this has been a bit helpful, Franz. Thank you for providing the opportunity to begin this discussion, to begin exploring whether it fits into the conference. I thank you for the panel, for trusting me a little bit that it may be a worthwhile discussion. You may not have learned new things, but I think you've been validated in your thinking, which is important as well. My big question, maybe Franz or the participants, we can think about this: how do we continue the conversation? On one hand, from industry, we're interested in research, getting better at selling ideas to us. We need them. We need good, disruptive ideas. But we are very busy. And on the other hand, I think, how do we connect industry or help industry see the good nerd a little bit better, right? Should have been longer. Thank you, Miller. Thank you, Grimschmidt. Should have been longer. Yes, maybe we should make more. How to make more room? This is our job together, right? So we have an industry panel. I've spoken to other people, Franz, the whole organization. How do we give more of this? Because if creating great ideas is what focuses of research, contribution to knowledge, let's help get that out and use it. There's nothing worse than a wonderful thought which could create so much benefit, which just doesn't get implemented. So thank you very much, everyone. I'll hand back to Berlin. Next year for CIRPe, we'll do a whole day of this, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, René, Tanja, Fiona, Andy. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much from Berlin. This is Francis speaking again. So thanks for having this very intense discussion. We are going to switch back now to the live stream. I'll see you in front of the camera again. Oh no, I'll be in front of the camera and you'll see me in front of the camera again in a minute. Thanks to the panel. Thanks for preparing that. Thanks, Oliver, for initiating that. And we are going to hopefully see more of that in next year's CIRPe web conference from Leuven then.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone. Cheers. And
see you in a few seconds on that live stream here again.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.